Episode number 2 of our Elk Talk live video question and answer session. Last time you guys sent us so many questions we couldn't get through even a fraction of them. So I'm either going to have to talk faster or we're going to just have to run longer, one or the other. But a couple things that I want to get to before we get into the questions. First of all, I want to thank Bowtech and Leopold and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for putting this together. If you want to be in on some prizes, last week I mentioned we're trying to put together some sweepstakes prizes for this. We've got them. It's going to be a Bowtech Rain 7 bow. Yeah, the smart bow. And it's going to be Leopold's throwing in a full draw 2 rangefinder and a pair of BX2 Tioga binoculars. But here's how you get in on it. Text Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, to 313131. And the whole form, everything will be there. All you got to do is fill it out. You don't got to buy anything. And you're in the sweepstakes. That's the June sweepstakes. And we're going to have monthly ones from here on out. So we're going to take one of the questions that was left over from last week that we didn't get to. And it was, what are the odds that the elk will still be bugling when I go to Colorado for the first season, which is mid to late October? Well, the answer to that is it depends. But you will probably catch the tail end of some bugling and rutting activity by, let's say, October 10th. Usually in a situation like that, when the first rifle shots happen, the older bulls say, I remember this. Last year, old Pete was out here bugling and he got shot. So usually after about the first day or two, the hunting pressure just shuts everything quiet and they go into sanctuary mode. Even in my home state of Montana at times, when we have our opener, usually in sometime late October, I've shot elk bugling on Halloween. It just depends on the amount of pressure and also the bull to cow ratios and how spread out your rut will be. So, all right, what do we got? Wondering how much it costs. Okay, some of you watch our episodes where we go in and what it is it's a landlocked piece of big BLM ground that we have to fly a helicopter to get in there. And a lot of people do it. A lot of people with private planes will fly into this same spot. And the question is, what does it cost for us to go in there? And whenever you hire an air taxi, whether it's a helicopter or a fixed-wing aircraft, it's a function of how many hours you're in the air. We've got it down pat where we can shuttle everything, and it ends up costing between $600 and $800 per hunter if we split it among 4 of us. And that also depends on how many elk you're hauling out. And if you're lucky, maybe you're going to haul out a few elk and the cost will be a little more. But so I'm a solo hunter. Am I better off stalking, calling, or sitting in a blind over a wallow or water source? Well, I wish I could tell you that I'm an expert at that, but I'm not, because I don't have the mental composition to sit for long periods of time. But as a solo hunter, I know a ton of guys who set up over a wallow. They're in a tree stand, or they set up over a water source or along a trail coming in, and some of those guys have remarkable success. They have way more patience than I do. One of the things that I do force myself when I'm hunting really dry, hot periods, especially in the southern southwest states like Arizona and New Mexico, if I'm archery hunting, a lot of people will go out and hunt the morning, go back to camp, take a nap, and then come hunt the afternoon. Not me. I force me and our crew, we go and sit somewhere near a water source during the middle of the day, because here's what will often happen. Once the bulls have their cows, and this is, say, September 15th, 18th. The big bulls are now with the cows. They will push those cows up to wherever they want to bed, and it's usually going to be in the shady side of the hill. It's going to be in a cut or a canyon. Once that bull beds his cows, he might stay bedded with them for a while, but very often from, say, noon until about 3 in the afternoon, that bull gets up solo and he goes in and waters quietly all by himself and comes back. A big bull elk doing all that rutting in the middle of September when it's hot has to drink more than just in the morning when they're down there and when they come back in the evening. A lot of times they have to go get water in midday. very effective tactic, especially if you're by yourself and you don't have a partner to call with you, is to go and sit by that water. Don't go back to camp. In the middle of the day, you can take a nap near a water hole just as well as you can back at camp. So don't give up on that precious time that you have to go hunting. Oh, how do I distinguish between a hunter making a bugle and the real thing? And I can't say I always can, but most times you'll notice that a hunter and his bugle is usually doesn't give you that vibration type feeling that you get from a real elk. A lot of times it has more of a flute sound to it. It might be, I don't want to say tinny or more plasticky sounding. But all that said, I've heard some real elk bugle where I said, oh, that's another hunter. And I walked down the ridge and it was really an elk. So it's not always a perfect 100% accuracy, but over time you'll be able to tell. One of the things that might help with that is have your buddy go a quarter of a mile away and just listen, and you'll kind of get the feel for the difference of how a human bugle sounds in the woods compared to an actual elk bugle. What times of the day during a late season hunt do you have the most success? Is it worth being out all day in the cold glassing just in case a bull gets up in the middle of the day? Yes, it is worth it. On a late season hunt, if you remember last time we talked about the 5 seasons of or 5 periods of the elk calendar: early season, pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, and late season. Late season is November 1st and later, and it can be miserable cold in Montana and Wyoming, some of the late draw hunts in Idaho and Nevada, even the 3rd season in Colorado. Some of these hunts are going on in November. And it's a glassing game. These elk are in sanctuary areas. They're not up moving around. They're not bugling. You got to be someplace where you can glass a bunch of these sanctuaries. And you have to sit there all day long. Yeah, your best times are the first hour in the morning and the last hour in the afternoon. But sometimes you'll see them in the middle of the day. They'll go up and get up to go and take a pee, or they'll get up to grab a piece of grass or whatever. And you'll find them. And the good part is, once you find a bull in a late season mode or sanctuary, they're not moving. You can sit there and wait for that bull to get up, or you can move in closer, play the wind, and that bull is going to be there. So I sit there all day long. If I start getting cold, I build a fire. You watch on our episodes, a lot of times we have a fire going. And people are like, well, gee, how does the elk not get scared when you build a fire? Fire is part of the natural ecosystem. Elk smell burns and fire and smoke all the time. Do whatever it takes to keep yourself warm, good clothing, good layering system, and if you have to, start a fire. But whatever you do, don't leave that glassing location. Do I use multiple trail cams while solo hunting? This is a question that, for those of you who live in Montana, would say, what do you mean? Because in Montana, trail cams cannot be used if there's an open hunting season. So I don't own a trail camera. I wish I could answer that question. But the reason that we threw it out there is because if you travel to these other states, don't assume that the rule in your state, whether it's trail cameras in this case, it might be expandable versus fixed blade broadheads. I believe Idaho does not allow mechanical broadheads. Whether it's the hunter orange rules, whether it's the use of two-way communication radios, there's different rules in every state. Wherever you're going hunting, if you're going out of your home state, make sure you read the regulations. The last thing you want is to have this great hunt, have all this fun, and then find out, oh gee, I didn't read that, and by accident you got crossways with one of the regulations they have. So all right. This one, the answer is going to be, could be anything. I'm taking my daughter on an elk hunt in Colorado next October for first season. What are the weather changes we could see? We're trying to put together the gear for this trip. Colorado is classic of the Rockies. You might be hunting them down in the foothills, down in the pinyon juniper, all the way up to, well, it peaks out at 14,000, but usually you're hunting, I've hunted elk in Colorado in areas at 10,000 for sure, sometimes higher. In those type of areas, you got to prepare for everything. You have to have warm clothes, you have to have base layers, you have to have clothes that breathe really well. Don't just show up thinking the weather's going to be what they forecast or the weather's going to be the same for the whole hunt. Bring what you need for the multitude, the whole range of weather conditions, because you're probably going to get it in the Rockies over the course of a week-long hunt. All right, going on my first elk hunt this year with my son, could you talk a little about the etiquette when running into hunters on public land? That's a really good question, because you know that our hunts are, just like most of you, are on public land. Everything we do is on public land, and most of you probably hunt public land, and there are other hunters out there. And we just did this on a YouTube video that we posted the other day. We ran into some hunters who, we were out hunting, and I told the camera crew, I said, boy, I hope those guys aren't in my favorite spot, my favorite glassing location. Guess what? They were. It's just a great glassing spot. They beat me there. I went up, said, hey guys, how's it going? You beat me here. Knock yourself out. I hope you shoot something. And off I went. And my rule, and I think the etiquette that most hunters apply, is the first person there gets the spot. And if you see someone beat you to the spot, you know what? Get the mattress off your back and get out there earlier the next day. Or if it's an evening hunt, you know what? Don't take such a long nap at camp. Get in there. Be the first person in there. And I have had instances where I was the first person there and people came and plopped down right beside me or right in front of me. And when we visited, they said, well, it's public land. I'll do what I want. I get that. Some people are going to be that way. Don't have a confrontation. There's no animal, no hunt worth having a confrontation. If someone doesn't follow that etiquette, just get up and go to another spot. So when I'm moving, I'm moving to a new area in Wyoming. What should I do to start learning the area before I move, since elk season will be here before we know it? What things should I look for that will hold elk? That's a pretty generic question. Again, I always go back and I can't, the reason I go back to this is it's so fundamental to being successful on public land elk. And it's just the absolute most effective way to find elk. That question, what would be helpful is to know what season are they hunting? What season, will they be there for the early season in August? Will they be there for the pre-rut in the first half of September? Will they be there in the peak rut for maybe the month from September 12th through October 10th? Will they be there in post-rut, or will they be there for the late season? And the reason that's important, and the reason I'm kind of dwelling on this point, is no matter what tag you draw, the very first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the season I have for my tag? In other words, what period do I get to hunt? Because the elk have different needs in each of these 5 seasons. Maybe their primary need is sanctuary, or maybe it's breeding, or maybe it's food and water. Well, you're going to find them in a different spot in early September than you find them in late October. So that's the very first question you have to ask yourself. And to try and answer that person's question, I would need to know what season is their tag good for. So going on my first elk hunt in Colorado and expecting to get into some high country. I'm from New Mexico. Should I be worried about altitude sickness, and how should I manage it? Yes, you should be worried about altitude sickness. I tell people who travel from lower elevations, give yourself 2 days at least to acclimate to high elevations. There are many, many complications with altitude sickness, and I wish that the person sitting here in this chair was one of the people who've had altitude sickness. You who've had it are sitting there nodding your head saying, yes, do whatever you can to avoid altitude sickness. Acclimation is the #1 thing. Hydration, good diet, good rest are the other things. It's common sense, but if I was you, I'd go and Google altitude sickness. There's many, many articles on it, and there's some really good points about how to mitigate its effect and how to actually prevent it through acclimation. Do you remember the first bull you shot? How about the first big one you missed? Oh yeah, I remember both of those. I tell people in all my seminars that I am probably the most below average elk hunter that ever was given the right to talk about elk hunting. When I moved to Montana, I spent my first 6 seasons trying every gadget, every gizmo, every new supposed shortcut that would get me my first public land bull elk, and none of it worked. Finally, after the 6th season, I sat down and I studied, what do elk need? What do they eat? Where do they go this time of year? What are their needs at the time of year I'm going to hunt them? That next season, the very first day, I applied the plan, kind of like I was talking about the 5 calendar or periods of the elk calendar. The next season, the very first night, I sleep at the trailhead. I said, you know what? These are post-rut bulls. They're going to be down in these ugly sanctuaries looking for a small piece of feed, place to feed. I killed the bull that first morning. And since then, I've been lucky. I get to hunt a lot of places. It seems a lot easier now. Don't think there are shortcuts. Public land elk hunting is as much here as it is anything. It's attitude, it's determination, and it's the expectation that this isn't going to be easy. I got to think as hard as I got to work. And with that, you'll probably have a whole lot more success. As far as do I remember the first big one I missed? I remember every one I've missed. And on our TV show, we show it, good, bad, or indifferent. And some of you will go to our YouTube channel where we have all of our old episodes, and you'll see the Arizona elk hunt, where I forgot to account for a wind drift, and the bull was quartering away, and the bullet drifted right here, took a little bit of hair off. That would have been the biggest bull I've ever shot by a long stretch. I was filming myself at the time. So as you can see, like all hunters, we got to have our list of excuses of why we missed, right? No, I missed. But we show it to you, so. Let's see, have you ever transported game meat on a commercial airline? If so, how did you do it? Yep, I do it a lot. You'll want to talk to the airline, because usually the airline rules are far more specific than the TSA rules. And most airlines, again, I'm generalizing here, most airlines want your game frozen. Reason being is they don't want your cooler to leak a whole bunch of whatever might drip or drain out of that cooler with unfrozen meat. That's pretty much the #1 thing. If you have any type of dry ice in there, you're going to have to declare it, let them know, and they're going to tell you it's allowed, not allowed, and what they have to do to accommodate for it. Other than that, it just gets treated as a really overweight and expensive piece of luggage. So, Randy, do you use horses when you hunt? I should, but I don't. I grew up in a family where we didn't have horses. I don't know anything about horses. That's why I have to have a really good backpack and a really strong back, and the determination that if I shoot something that's coming out in pieces on my back. For people who have horses, hey, I envy you. But because I know so little about horses, they probably die of neglect if left to my care. And also when we're going on multiple hunts, say we're going on a road trip that's 3 or 4 hunts, it would be really hard to care for livestock for our animals throughout a whole 3 or 4 week period. So we're not able to get into the backcountry until mid-September during the black powder week and that week after. How do you find out how much pressure they had before we got there? I can tell you that's a Colorado question, because Colorado is the only state where archery and black powder are going on at the same time. There really is no way to tell until you get there. You know, that part of that just comes from talking to biologists, talking to other people. Maybe you've hunted it in the past, or you know someone who's hunted it in the past, and they can give you that information. But as a traveling hunter, that's a little bit of the roll of the dice that we all subject ourselves to, is we don't really know what's happening until we get there. So, do you wear your hunting boots around camp? No. And we've done a whole video out on our YouTube channel about boot care and keeping your feet warm. I'm one of those lucky people that grew up on the Canadian border up in northern Minnesota, just outside of International Falls. We knew how to keep our hands and our feet warm. And I'm going to give you a couple hints on how to keep your feet warm. I wear a non-insulated Kenetrek Mountain Extreme boot even when it's 0 degrees out. Do not wear your socks or your boot around camp. Say we have a base camp and we're going to drive 10 miles to a trailhead and then we're going to start hiking. I wear my whatever camp shoes or whatever I wear as my casual shoes, I wear them all the way to the trailhead. Because the minute you put your boot or your sock on, your feet, just naturally our body perspires, and your feet perspire more than other parts of your body. So you're instantly introducing moisture to your boot. I don't do that. When I get to the trailhead, I take those camp shoes off. I have a fresh pair of socks. I put those fresh socks on, put those boots on, and then I hit the trail. I will sometimes even bring a fresh pair of socks in my pack in these later, colder hunts. Because if I get up there and I've just been exerting myself, you're going to have some perspiration. And if you take a really good pair of wool socks with you, you take the pair off that you've been wearing, hang them in a tree for probably 10 minutes so they'll dry, put the other warm pair on, dry pair, and you're going to be good to go. Take care of your feet. Do not wear your hunting boots around camp. Don't wear them in and out of the truck. Put those on once you get to the trailhead and start hunting for the day. When you get back to camp that night, the very first thing you should do is dry those boots out. Moisture is what is going to cause your feet to be cold, because the skin surface loses heat 5 times faster when moisture is evaporating. The same applies to your feet. So, let's see. Can an Easterner come solo and hunt elk? Sure can. If so, how should we adapt tactics to compensate? Not get away as far, find some local llama guys. First of all, yes, any Easterner can come solo and hunt elk. It's guys do it every year, and some of them take their whitetail tactics and they apply it to elk hunting. As much as my elk hunting tactics are nothing near what a whitetail guy would do. I'm doing a lot of calling, running and gunning. I'm doing spot and stock. A lot of you guys are really patient. You whitetail hunters have it figured out, how to be patient, how to occupy your mind. A lot of us Western guys got to see what's over the next ridge, what's over the next ridge. If you come out here, maybe you bring a tree stand, maybe whatever you think is going to work for you. But think about what season you're coming, what the elk are going to be doing, and where you're going to find them. And make sure that you have the gear you need to get the elk out once you have it on the ground. That's probably the biggest challenge. Back in your home state, maybe you can only hunt whitetail deer. I've done a video out on our YouTube channel about how to do what we call the gutless method. It's how we bone and quarter a deer, a white-tailed deer, out in the woods, and how we pack it out. It's the same exact process for an elk, other than instead of a 200-pound carcass laying there, you got a 600-pound carcass laying there. So those are things you can practice at home. So when you get here, everything's not foreign and new to you. So, all right, backcountry camping question. How do you cross rivers? Usually I don't, and I'm going to tell you why. Let's say it's knee high or higher. Do you remove your boots? Do you go barefoot, or do you have a set of water crossing shoes or camp shoes? It depends on the time of year, but when it's cold and later, I'm not crossing rivers. I know some people will. I'm not. There's too much risk, too much danger. Very often I would be crossing in the dark. I'd be crossing in November when it's super, super cold. I'm not going to be doing that. If you do find that you have to cross a river, they make these little waders. I think they're called wiggies. I might have that wrong, but my friends in Canada use them. And that's what they use for crossing rivers. But for a safety factor, I don't do it. If you know that there's a big bull elk across the river, you might be tempted. And maybe I would be tempted also. But I try to find other ways to negotiate that. So. All right. Are there generally fewer hunters in wilderness areas versus BLM? It depends, but as a general rule, yeah. A wilderness area, understand that we're talking about the wilderness area is a designated area under the Wilderness Act. It doesn't allow for motorized travel. It doesn't allow for mountain bikes. It's just foot or horseback. So usually you're going to have less hunting pressure there versus Bureau of Land Management. That's what the BLM stands for. Very often that's open to multiple forms of access, whether it's motorized access, it's ATVs, UTVs, bicycles, whatever. So very often you're going to have less hunting pressure in a wilderness area than you are in just general BLM or Forest Service lands. What average elevation would benefit me most in elk hunting scenarios out west? How about temperature? That's and the reason that we're taking that question is it depends on so many things. again, it goes back to understanding what the elk need in the time you're going to be hunting them. So if food is the primary factor, like it is, say, early season, you need to find what elevation the best, most succulent food is at. And usually that's going to be in a band of elevation, or it's going to be on a certain slope, or it's going to be some other factor is going to drive the elk to that elevation. It's usually the food. I don't hunt elevation specific things, but there's reasons where people will think about that. I just keep going back to when people ask these generic questions, it seems that they're kind of asking, where do I start? And where you start is understanding the needs the elk have in the period that you're hunting them. Would you suggest Idaho or Colorado for over-the-counter elk? I didn't draw in my home state of New Mexico, and I'm trying to make a plan B. Yes, I'd suggest either or both. You see in our show, we hunt Colorado over-the-counter elk a lot. Colorado hosts more non-resident hunters than any state in the Union. They have the largest elk herd of any state in the Union, and they have 23 million acres of public land to go and hunt. Idaho has great hunting. The only reason I've not been there is because so often my calendar in late October, when Idaho's do-it-yourself or over-the-counter season is, I'm usually somewhere else. I have nothing against Idaho. I'm grinding at the bit to get there. Archery seasons, if I had to pick between the two, Idaho and Colorado, I'd probably go to Idaho in archery season versus Colorado. Just my personal preference. How do you hunt the elk's bedroom when you stumble upon it? I don't. I never, it's almost like whitetails. I do not go in and bump that elk from where they're comfortable. I will hunt around the periphery, I'll hunt around the fringe, especially in a lot of the later season hunts, say a post-rut or a late season hunt. If you bump that bull, you've messed up maybe your whole hunt, because you've spent days trying to find where he is at. Don't mess it up. You're going to get one chance at him. Make sure you kill that bull when you get your one chance. Now, sometimes you just stumble into him and there's nothing you can do about it. In the rut, the answer would be slightly different. If I know where, quote unquote, their bedroom is, I'm going to hunt close to it. I'm going to hunt them on their way from there and their way back to there. But I'm not going right in there. Once you find that elk are comfortable in some place, let them stay comfortable. How do you prepare for hiking 8 miles a day and possibly packing an elk out? What's your preseason preparation? Well, first of all, I'm lucky I live at a higher elevation. If you don't, you're just going to have to get your cardio there and your legs and your core. I hike. That's my preparation. I don't go to the gym. I have found nothing yet that replicates putting 30, 35 pounds on my back and hiking up and down hills. Now, I live in a place where there's some great hills where I can go and do a hike that gets me an elevation change of 5,000 vertical feet if I was tough enough and wanted to do it. You might live in a place where, look, 200 feet of vertical change is a lot, okay? Do that 200 feet multiple times. Do it on a side hill. Do whatever. Climb up and down, over, through. Traversing the mountains is the best thing I've found to replicate what you're going to do as far as muscle usage when you're out elk hunting. Exert yourself there and make yourself do it, and that's what I've found is my best training for that. Can you talk about the over-the-counter elk hunting opportunities in Colorado? Yeah, they're immense. I think 90 units in Colorado in the West Slope, mostly all the West Slope units, are open to over-the-counter. I believe just about all of them for archery. And then they have a second rifle season and a third rifle season. The second rifle season is usually sometime in the last part of October. And then the third rifle season is somewhere usually in the first part of November. The fourth season and the first season that sandwich the second and third rifle seasons are limited entry. They're not over the counter. So millions of acres of public land, go buy your tag over the counter and off you go. So I'm a 15-year-old and I just pulled my first elk tag in Nevada. Yeah. I have the early season, which is late October and late November. Do you have any tips that can help me out? I don't. Specifically, other than you're going to be hunting, again, a post-rut period. So look for elk in areas that people may not want to go. In other words, if you walk up to a spot and you say, boy, I wouldn't like to pack an elk out of there. Boy, I wouldn't want to have to climb up there. The odds are you've found an elk sanctuary. Now, of all the sanctuaries you find on your map, they're not all created equal. In your part of the world, and I get to hunt Nevada a lot, fortunately. I've had a Nevada elk tag there. I've helped on some Nevada hunts. The sanctuaries you're looking for are the ones that have water and then secondarily feed nearby. I know that's generic, but if I knew it was a place I hunted, I'd be glad to help you out. But go there before your season starts if you can. Try to get there a day or two early. Scout as much as you can. Learn where maybe you can find a bull elk that's hanging out before season even opens, and you can kind of know, all right, opening morning, I got some elk to deal with here. But the odds are, besides sanctuary, you're going to find them near water. So I'm thinking we got time for one more question, but before we get to that, I forgot to say when we started this, you can certainly share this whole broadcast with friends, and I wish you would. I hope you will. We're going to put this up on our YouTube channel, but we're going to be doing this every Wednesday, and if you'd share this with people, it would help us a lot. It would get the word out more, and hopefully we've got some information here that would help some of your hunting friends. So, do you do any bugling at night to locate bulls for your morning hunts? Yes, lots. In fact, if I have a rut hunt, I am up and at them anywhere an hour to 2 hours before the sun comes up. And a lot of times I might, if it's a Forest Service road that's open, I might drive it, park the truck, walk out to a ridge and bugle. If I hear something, I mark it on my GPS. Come back, I drive further, go out and do the same thing. By the time before the sun comes up, I've marked quite a few locations on my GPS that say, I know there are bulls there. I heard them. Very seldom do you hear other hunters in the dark. If you hear them in the dark, the odds are it's a bull. So then I look at, all right, here's where I heard a whole pocket of them. I'm going in there. That's the first place I'm going. I'm going to be in there before the sun comes up. I'm going to be playing the wind, getting myself in position. So hopefully when they make their move, whether it's to go to bed or whatever, I'm going to be in their way. Maybe I'll have an encounter. So anyhow, let me see. I just can't shut it off. Now I need one more question. I'm in the spirit here. What's your go-to move on an elk who is bugling as he moves away? My go-to move, I'm probably not the best guy to say what the go-to move is. Usually I've made a mistake and that's why he's moving away. If a bull elk is moving away and it's bugling, I'm assuming it's the rut, good luck catching him. I will go to where I think he's going to go. I don't call to him. I don't anything. I just get on my feet and I am moving as fast as I can, reading the wind to try to get myself in some position to get where he wants to go. It's really hard to turn an elk that has heard you, smelled you, seen you, and he's pushing his cows away. Best thing you can do is either let him go until evening, or if you can, find some way to get out in front of him and let him go to where he wants to go and be there waiting for him. So, all right, I think we've covered it all, folks. I want to thank Bowtech. I want to thank Leupold. I want to thank the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for making this Elk Talk live Q&A session available. And remember, text will get you in the sweepstakes. The sweepstakes is the Bowtech Rain 7 bow, the smart bow. It's Leupold's Full Draw 2 digital rangefinder and a BX2 Tioga binocular from Leupold. And the way that you get into that is you text Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, to 313131. And I think I've covered everything, but really I want to thank you. I want to thank you who watch this, who ask all these questions, who follow us on our YouTube platform, our Hunt Talk forum, our podcasts, all the places that we're trying to help people become public land hunters. It's an exciting thing to be doing this. It's an exciting time of the year. When we did this last week, the next day or 2 days later, Nevada announced their draw results. Colorado's doing it. Wyoming's going to be doing it at the end of this month. Montana's going to be doing some of their other hunts for draw results. It's a fun time. You know what tag you're going to have. If you don't have a tag, if you didn't draw on the limited entry tags, please still go elk hunting. We did a whole video series about how you can still go elk hunting. That's the whole key. Go every year. Just because you didn't draw your glory tag, don't stay home. Go, go, go. And thanks for watching. Did we do it? We done?
Yeah. It went up, it went up, it went up, it went